To recap where we are now, again, this division has moved in this direction. At the time of the battle, none of these trees, these scattered trees, would have been here. This was wide open. So as you look to the south of us where the trees begin in earns, where it gets pretty thick, that's a historic edge line of the West Woods. And then out here in front of us where they start again pretty thick, that's another historic edge of the West Woods, and they run up towards the fence lines here, and then it kind of jogs off towards the northwest, and that's where you have this section on the other side of modern Route 65. Well, right in front of us is a pretty thin section. If we walk through here, we'd walk maybe about 100 yards and we'd reach modern Route 65. And so again, what happens is Dana's brigade, the 1st Brigade, many of the regiments get to the edge line of the West Woods. The 15th Mass gets to the edge line of the West Woods. The 82nd New York gets to the edge line. The 1st Minnesota, they just press all the way through the woods. No problems. But when they get to the edge of the wood lines, that's when the problems erupt. Because again, that Confederate artillery out of Nicodemus Heights, they held that ground for about the first hour of battle. And what happened, as the Federal assaults were able to move further and further south, the guns out of Nicodemus Heights, because of the West Woods, pretty much ran out of targets. And by that point, the Union artillery out north of the North Woods started to get the range of Nicodemus Heights. It's a thin piece of land. If you talk to Lynn Fluck, he's the farmer out there, he says the front of that hillside is just filled with artillery shells. So many of those rounds, according to him, coming up a little short, hitting the front of the hillside. But with the Federals, specifically the 1st Corps, pushing so far south, and the Union artillery getting the range on Nicodemus Heights, those 15 to 18 guns out there in the John Pelham were forced to fall back to the next ridge, Hauser's Ridge. And so as Dana's line gets out to the edge of the West Woods, as I said, you had about 30 guns out there, they open fire. No infantry, all artillery, open fire right into this Union line. The men in the 15th said that that initial fire caused us to stop, fall back into the woods a little bit, regather ourselves, and when they pushed out, by that point, about 5 minutes, that 5-minute time allowed the Confederate infantry to make their appearance on the battlefield. McLaws' division. These guys had arrived in Shepherdstown at about 11 o'clock on the evening of September 16th. They marched up from Harper's Ferry. They start to get comfortable for the evening. Word is sent from Shepherdstown over here to Lee saying McLaws' division's over here in Shepherdstown, let us know when you're going to need us. Lee writes back and says, we need you to get to the battlefield tonight. So they cross the Potomac River by torchlight. They crossed the river by torchlight. They got to the battlefield just outside of the point where Lee's headquarters is located. Elementary school right in that area, if you're familiar with that. And the men, they arrived there about 2 or 3 in the evening, or early morning hours, I should say, and that's where they're then allowed to lay down for the night. Early in the morning, with Hood's division getting shot to pieces, messages are being sent back. You need to send soldiers, you need to send troops. Hood appears to Lee, we need soldiers, and Lee says, well, I'll be up there in just a little bit. And the response was, well, it's not your presence, we need soldiers. And so McLaws' troops are sent up towards the front. It wasn't a plan to ambush these Union troops moving. It was just a collision of thousands of men just a little bit to the south of us. It wasn't a planned attack. It wasn't an ambush. It wasn't a trap. Okay. The problem, though, becomes the 34th New York and the 125th Pennsylvania behind the church. The 15th Massachusetts out here. So all this area in front of us, everyone's familiar with the church is that way. Straight down the Hagerstown Turnpike, the 15th Mass is out that way. You have a huge slice of open area. And so, as McLaws' men start moving to the battlefield, the lead brigade, Cobb's brigade, they kind of drift off and break away a little bit. And they end up over a ridge, and they end up eventually connecting in with the sunken road. They don't take part in the fighting here. They get lost. They get lost because of the terrain. The next guy is moving up, Kershaw's men from South Carolina, followed by Barksdale's Mississippians. As they start moving, Kershaw's men are the first ones to hit, and they'll hit the 125th Pennsylvania. They have pushed further west and south, and they're along the south part of the West Woods. But the South Carolinians start moving into the fight. And they'll drive the 125th Pennsylvania, a new regiment, back. They then run into the 34th New York up on the high ground just behind the Dunker Church there where their monument stands. By that point, Barksdale's 4 regiments, 2 of them break off and they push up towards, again, the 125th Pennsylvania, 34th New York. The other 2, they move through some low terrain. You can sort of see how this is dropping off over here. And it's through that little valley or little gully there. These 2 regiments move up, and when they get to the edge, the West Woods, they're right on the flank. They're behind the 15th Massachusetts. And they start to encounter men from the 7th Michigan. They're over here in the woods. They had crossed the pike. They run into the 59th New York as well. The 59th would have been out over here, just on the edge of the woods. Somebody has to help me. Keith, what's the other brigade over here? No, the Confederate Brigade. Yeah, you know. It's so easy. I can't. John, what is it? No. Sims, thank you. Georgia and Virginians, they start moving towards this part of the line, towards the 15th Mass. And so, if we're moving, if I'm the Confederates pushing north, Kershaw breaks off, and then Barksdale moves up, and then Sims turns and pushes straight towards where we're standing today, right up through the woods. And all that happened really in 5 minutes. Again, that artillery stopped the initial Union advance, caused them to fall back into the woods, as I said. When they push back out, then thousands of Confederates are moving up into them, onto their flank. Fighting becomes so confusing, the 59th New York starts firing right into the backs of their own men from Massachusetts. The 15th Mass, they're getting hit from the front, they're getting hit from the side from Barksdale's men, and they're getting hit by their own men from the 59th. They were able to hold that position for just a little while, about 15 minutes. And in the end, they took 582 men into battle, 318 killed or wounded. That's the highest number of casualties in any regiment on the battlefield, out of any regiment, north or south. 318. So we're looking at 55%. 55% casualty rate. As the line starts to break, it's very interesting to note, looking at the casualties, looking at the percentages and so on, the ones that are down over here, I mean, it's obvious, they'll suffer more than the ones over here. So when looking at the lines, looking at the casualties, the first line, Gorman's line, 1,667 men into battle, 690 killed or wounded. If you're in the 34th New York, 15th Mass, 82nd New York, 1st Minnesota. 41% casualties, almost half that line. 50% casualty, 55% casualty, then 38 over here, and then 21. 21. See, the heavy fighting is in the woods, and the confusion is in the woods, and the confusion is where the flank is compromised. The next line, so starting with the 42nd New York, 53% casualties. 7th Michigan, right over here, 55%. 59th New York, the highest percent of casualty for any of these regiments, 59% in the 59th New York. 381 into battle, 224 killed or wounded. Out in front of us here, the 20th Mass, and then a little bit further to the north, the 19th Mass, 33 and 35% loss. It's very telling, the last line. This was the biggest brigade, Philadelphia Brigade, 72nd Pennsylvania, 35%, and they were on the far left. But they made it to maybe the Hagerstown Turnpike. And really by the time they're moving up, everything is starting to fall apart over here. So they're moving up and then quickly falling back out. So 35%. Next one's down, the 69th Pennsylvania, 19%. The 106th, right up over here, 15%. The last regiment, though, 71st, it took 27%. And what we're kind of surmise is that the guys way out over here, they see there's going to be a problem, and they have enough room to maneuver around. And so some of these soldiers in Howard's brigade will make a stand along this fence line here to the north of us. And some will then, after being pushed from there, fall back towards the Miller farm and make a stand along there. So more than likely, that's where these casualties are coming from trying to stop this Confederate advance. The Confederate counterattack, as they push out of the woods here, Kershaw's able to try, and he's not trying, but he's able to stop his men from pushing across the Hagerstown Turnpike. Barksdale not as fortunate. His men push off into this open area. Sims, his men push up through and in that direction. But by that point, Union artillery, a long line of guns stretching from the Smoketown Road up towards the North Woods had been established. And so once these Confederates get up towards the Hagerstown Turnpike and up towards the cornfield, that line of artillery opens fire on them and causes them to fall back. Causes them to fall back. So, 5,779 men in Sedgwick's division. 2,126 killed or wounded in 20 minutes. And a little more than the time that we've been just right here. Right here. 2,200 killed or wounded in about 20 minutes. 38% loss for that division. 38% loss. So the highest percent was the 59th New York at 59, the highest number, the 15th Mass. The lowest was 106 Pennsylvania. Again, they're right out here. 15%. They lost 77 men. 77 is a small number on the day of Antietam, not when we can compare it to today. If you get reporting on the TV today, 77 of our guys killed overseas. That's unbelievable. So you can imagine 154 years ago, there's reports and newspaper accounts, and more importantly, the lists of the names, the casualty lists printed in the newspapers. Imagine the shock that took place in many of these small towns across the country. While all that is going on, we still have George Greene's division down in that little swale behind the visitor center. They were down there, they need to be resupplied, they need to be reformed, and while they're down there, they will encounter, they can see this Union assault, not only the one that moved this way. Greene does not know that these troops had just took over 2,000 casualties in 20 minutes. Greene has no idea of that.
Not just one. Wow.
I just looked and I forgot that was going to happen. Sorry. So Greene's down there, resupplied, reformed, and they'll start pushing up to the ridge where that artillery, the Confederate artillery, was posted. And they'll encounter some of Kershaw's men. That had at first hit the 125th Pennsylvania and 34th New York. They'll hit Kershaw's men, they'll hit some more Confederates, and we'll kind of wrap that up a little bit later on. But Greene has no idea as he pushes in the woods that these guys have been forced back out. And while Greene's down there, that's when the Union assaults start moving towards the sunken road. So Greene is kind of the center point between this half-mile gap between the second, or I should say the Sedgwick's division, the 2nd Corps, and French's division of the 2nd Corps. That's all very confusing. You can see out there how confusing that was, and things just get turned around and hard to hear, and as I said, communication was not pulling out your cell phone. Want to add anything to that?
Well, I just want to thank everybody for participating in